So it's time for us to look at painting landscapes. Now this is a really interesting feature that they've added in that they have both weighted and non-weighted painting. Now I'm going to show you how these work. First off, I'm going to bring my content browser back down this way, and I'm going to, in content, I'm going to create a new folder that's going to be called landscape assets. I'm just isolating these a bit to make my life a little bit easier when I want to handle everything. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to add a material, and this is going to be called m_simple landscape. Now we're not going to be running with this in the end, however we will be using this for quick testing to begin with. Before I go any further as well though, I do want to clear the region selection that was there because that was just driving me nuts. So click on that button up top and you'll be good. At which point what I'm going to do is double click on simple landscape, and I want you to just add two things for me. First, what we're going to do is I want to right click and type in landscape, and you'll see that we have a couple of landscape specific options. Now in this case, the one that I want to add is going to be a landscape layer blend, and I want you to add and call it grass, and add another and call it dirt. Now this isn't going to be our final product, so I don't care about how intense the setup is. It's purely there for the sake of demonstrating things. Now if I get grass and I add a vector, so I'm going to hold down V and left click, and then I'm going to set this color to be something vaguely green for demonstration, and I plug this in. I'm now going to add another one, so I hit Control W, I'm going to call this dirt, and I'm going to click here and set this to something vaguely brownish and plug that in. Now you can preview how this would look if my preview weight was set to 1. You can see that it would be green. Now I'm going to hit apply and save. Now the reason I bring this up as a very important feature as the difference between landscape types is that when I go back to here and I go to my landscape, I'm going to go to over here, I'm going to set the material for the landscape. Okay, so I'm going to set this up to be using the material that we've just created. Now by default, this is going to be selecting the landscape gizmo. Honestly, I find it easier sometimes to just ignore the management setup for a little bit and just click on the landscape up top. But you can see that once I did click it, we've got all of our options available, and I'm going to set this to be simple landscape. Now, upon doing so, you'll see that the two layers that we created, grass and dirt, are both exposed. And what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to add some layer info for both of them. So to do that, all you need to do is click on Create Layer Info, and for the time being, we're going to add Weight Blended Layer, because that's what I wanted to demonstrate to everyone. I'm going to put this in Landscape Assets, and I'm going to do this again, Weight Blended, and put it in Landscape Assets. So we've got these two things set up. Now, if you right-click on Grass and click Fill Layer, and then wait a second, you'll see that it's now covered the landscape in green. And if I wanted to, I could click on dirt and I could paint in. First time you ever add anything to a component, by the way, it's going to do what you just saw. It's going to have to rebuild the material if that combination's never been used. And I'm going to paint this straight in. Now this looks fine and dandy, right? But what you'll notice is happening is that when I paint in dirt, it removes the grass. So eventually it fades from green to brown and is then exclusively brown. Now, the difference between weighted landscape layers and non-weighted is that if you use non-weighted layers, you can actually paint onto each layer if you set up a way for them to blend, which we do with height maps. So what do I mean by that? I mean that if we had, for instance, a rock layer and a grass layer, as the grass layer blended into the rock layer, we could fill in the cracks on the rock and add grass in between the cracks on the rock until it became all rock. Or we could keep it as a mix between both. And that's where the real power comes from, in my opinion, of the advanced landscape systems that you can set up. So let's go about doing that. So for this next presentation, we're going to be focusing on advanced landscapes.